Good evening. I'm Kelly Wright. Thanks for joining me as we spend the next hour together, and I hope you enjoyed your Labor Day weekend. I'm also hoping that you're safe and well, taking care of yourself and your family because you matter. My opening observations tonight, the protests that have been going on for so many days now in Portland, Oregon, turning deadly over the weekend. And then there's the protests that have been going on in Kenosha, Wisconsin. Should also point out here that Vice President Mike Pence and his challenger, vice presidential candidate for the Democratic ticket, Kamala Harris, visiting Kenosha on the same day, yet with two different messages. Mike Pence talking about law and order, Kamala Harris reaching out with appeal for mercy and justice and bringing people together to heal in that community. Two different stories from two people who want to help run this country. And then there's Rochester. In the wake of Daniel Prude's death and the video showing the circumstances of his encounter with police that subsequently led to his death, the Black community of Rochester, New York, has been experiencing a collective mood of heartbreak and anger. They have been taking their outrage to the streets in protests. Some of those protests erupted into violent clashes last week with police. But over the holiday weekend, something different took place. The mayor called upon faith leaders to join in leading the protests. Also, Mayor Lovely Warren urged the Rochester Police Department to adopt a smaller and more restrained posture. Both actions resulting in a peaceful demonstration without any arrest or violence. Clearly, it's a step in the right direction for a city that is hurting and in need of healing. Yet, President Trump criticized the mayor in a Labor Day tweet, stating the city was weakly run by a radical left Democrat governor. In response, Mayor Warren stated, "I ask that all involved ignore the commentary from the president. It is clear his only desire is to bait people to act with hate and incite violence that he believes will benefit him politically. We will not give him what he wants," she added, stating, "We will continue to act with grace and do the work necessary to improve Rochester and our entire community." Now, we should note that this show has reached out to Mayor Warren for an interview, and we will continue to do that. We know that she's very busy, and we're awaiting her response. In the meantime, she did address the people, the citizens, I should say, of her community by stating over 1,000 people came together in solidarity to remember the life of Daniel Prude and call for the change that is needed to overcome structural and institutional racism. And with that, we focus a large part of our program tonight on Rochester through the eyes of a young broadcast station owner who is trying to make sure that her station is championing the cause of hope, of love, freedom, and peace, and healing in her community. And those are my opening observations. So joining me now to discuss what's taking place in Rochester and how she and the people she represents can effectuate some change in that community is Andrea Langston. She is the owner of WDKX, and I like those call letters. And Andrea, good of you to join us today.
Thank you so much for having me. Happy to be here.
I am happy to have you. I wish it was under more favorable conditions right now because of what the temperatures, the atmosphere there on the ground in Rochester. But I talked about how I like the call letters of your station. If you could just briefly explain the significance of that, I think that's a great way to start.
Yeah, so we're one of the only Black-owned radio stations in the country. Our call letters stand for Frederick Douglass, Martin Luther King Jr., and Malcolm X. We actually, it's just a crazy full circle how things come. My grandfather ended up starting WDKX right after the riots in Rochester of '64. And, Malcolm X came to give speeches, and we had a lot of leaders come through Rochester to just talk about the frustration, the anger that everyone felt. But media was not portraying Black people of color in a good light. And my family, as well, the other community leaders thought it was the perfect time for us to have our own. And that's how WDKX was born.
And having conversations of this type really will provide some healing as well as fresh ideas that perhaps not just the station or you as an owner, but perhaps even the city, the mayor, the police community, as well as the police chief can listen in and learn from that. Do you find that taking place?
Yes. So even since the start of COVID, we've invited the mayor on to our show. We have the Wake Up Club, which is our morning show, but the last hour of the Wake Up Club, we call the Water Cooler, and it's essentially a talk show. So she's been joining us every Friday since COVID started to just inform the community of just different programs that are going on and how things, the system really works. And she even joined us last week to address what happened with the Daniel Prude incident. And it really helps, I feel, to inform the community for people that don't know where to direct their anger. It helps. I think what we're doing best right now is just to give people the knowledge that they need so they can do best with it, what they see fit, to get them more active in the community, to kind of help guide them what direction they want to go in.
You know, last week you told me that the mayor was going to be on, and I actually listened in, and I was quite surprised that she went so far as to say what happened to Daniel Prude was a failure of the system failing him, and the only one who really supported him at that time was his family in doing the right thing, calling 911 to get him some help. And instead, it resulted in his death, and she expressed some remorse for that, as well as apologizing to the community for what had taken place. How did that strike you?
You know, I have I have the feeling that I have regards to this entire situation is this is, as Black people, we've been dealing with this for decades, centuries. The
Yeah.
system constantly fails us. I feel as if it's designed to fail us. We can do our best to educate ourselves and put ourselves in places to help best. But like she said, the system failed this man and it continues to fail people. Um, we do our best as individuals, but as we're a part of a system at large, we're going to need a lot more force behind it instead of just placing one person. I think that often we put a lot of responsibility on an individual instead of as the whole taking responsibility and understanding the system is much larger than just one person in place of office or one person. It's how it's all constructed.
Yeah, that's good. Andre, I'd like you to stay with me because after the break, I want to get more into how you construct a deconstruction of the violence and a de-escalation of the situations like Daniel Prude and George Floyd and so many other things that have affected and impacted our community greatly. Right after the break, we'll be talking to this wonderful owner of a great station in Rochester. Back with more after this. And welcome back to the program. I'm talking to Andrea Langston. She is the owner of WDKX, and the DKX standing for
Frederick Douglass, Martin Luther King Jr., and Malcolm X.
incredible vision that your grandfather had in creating this station that has meant so much to the people of Rochester. Tell me what Rochester as a city is like, because we're on the outside looking in, and the closest I've been to Rochester was just a brief visit and for a speech that I was giving in Sodus, which is nearby. But what is Rochester like as a community?
Yeah. Oh, so a lot of times people hear New York and they think the city, but we're up close to the border of Canada. So it's a little more spread out, a little bit more. It's a small city. As a whole, I think I had an amazing time growing up in Rochester. People look out for each other. Everyone knows each other. And there's a sense of family in Rochester. The Black experience is a little different for for us in Rochester. It does feel a bit segregated from how I grew up. It does feel a bit segregated. And, we learn to just kind of take care of ourselves, and the situations that are happening are really no surprise to us because they're things that we've seen our whole lives growing up there. But I feel like the community at large has done a great job of just preserving the family bond between those within the Black community of Rochester.
You mentioned the community, the family bonds, the close-knit camaraderie between the Blacks who live in Rochester. Because of that, as you go through this very tumultuous time in the wake of the death of Daniel Prude and the fact that the world has seen this despicable video and the fact that it was inflicted upon your community, a member of the community, by police that you are trying to broker a better relationship with.
Yeah.
Can unity be achieved for your community?
Yeah, of course. I think unity can be achieved, but steps have to be taken. In my personal opinion, for us to have, I mean, we've tried our best to create a better relationship with the police, just as the Black community within Rochester, but it's going to be more than just like a program that fixes things. It's going to have to be a complete change of mindset. It can't be an us versus them type of situation. It has to be an all of us in this together, working towards a common good. And until that mindset is changed, we won't have unity, but I believe that it can be achieved.
Well, you know what you express is what many people throughout the country feel. I think what's happening is we're looking at a microcosm of what's happening to other Black communities throughout this country, where there's a sense of you belong, but you don't belong, and
Yeah,
yet you're striving to get along and improve the situation for everybody
yeah,
in the community: Black, brown, yellow, red, white, what
yeah,
have you.
right.
So I see and hear the encouragement from you, from the members of your station, the radio announcers who have been on air, reminding people to keep their head up. But when you see the violence that has taken place in your city, how did that affect you and the members of the community who say, we don't need the violence, we need change, not violence?
It hurts. It really hurts to watch some of those videos. But I get it. Like I get people's anger. Like I'm not gonna be upset or disappointed by someone kind of acting that way. I get it. I completely understand why someone would want to just break a window or just throw a table, or we've built up so much anger that we've just been taught constantly to just like push down and like keep moving forward. So I understand it. I'm not happy about it, but I get it. All we can do as members of this community, because I don't think we need to look at it as leaders or members, we're all part of this community, is just really helping, like you say, uplift people. Like on the station, we do affirmations and we constantly are pushing, I don't want to say pushing, but we're opening people's minds to positivity and looking at things in a different light and trying to take that sense of stillness, that sense of positivity with them throughout the day. So we'll have it playing throughout the day. We'll have motivational quotes throughout the day. We'll have a couple pastors like come on and give quick little sermons or gospel songs that we play in between our hip hop and R&B, because it's Black music. So we want to express the full just spectrum of Blackness on DKX. And there's just there's so much negativity we can focus on. There's so much violence that we could focus on, but the whole point of this business, our whole mission is to change the perspective and change the narrative. And if we have the power to change the narrative, then the world is really just at our fingertips.
When we return, I'll continue my conversation with Andrea Langston, owner of WDKX in Rochester. Very pivotal times right now, and she is on the front lines along with the station in that city to do something good for the hood, as I like to say. Back with more after this. And welcome back to the program. So I'm actually so delighted to have this conversation with you, Andrea Langston, owner of WDKX. Is it a situation that you foresee? Well, there's no quick remedies in this.
No,
What will
no.
you have to do beyond the dialogue, beyond the conversations? how do you effectuate change policy-wise to make sure that the police community is embracing the desires and aspirations of the Black community?
Going in the right direction, specifically dealing with like why the police are called and what situations the police are called for. I don't necessarily think they need to be at everything that's called. Like with a mental health situation, we have 211. And if I think it could have just been dealt with more delicately. I think that with police, their training definitely has to be looked at in terms of the compassion that's given and their involvement within the community. Like, do all the police officers live in the city of Rochester? No. And I think maybe if they lived within the community or were a part of the community a little bit more deeply, they would have a little bit more compassion. And I'm speaking generally. Of course, there are officers that live in the city that have more compassion. But I think that, like, again, it can't be a us versus them thing. If we just bring everyone in and see that we're all just on the same page, I think we'll have a lot less problems. Looking at how officers are trained in situations like that, do they necessarily need to be called in on a mental health situation? My personal beliefs is no, I don't think so. I think that how we look at mental health, especially within Black community, needs to be looked at. How we look at drug abuse or therapy, or how I don't necessarily think that police need to be brought in with those situations. Maybe they don't need to be brought in with domestic violence issues too. There needs to be something else, because if someone just comes at you with a gun drawn, what is your first reaction going to be? Are you going to just, oh, like everything's fine? No, you're going to get angry. You're going to get scared. You might react. So there has to be a change in how things are done. You can't call 911 for everything. In my personal belief, there has to be another solution. There has to be someone that can de-escalate situations. If you're having an argument with your spouse, a police officer with a gun drawn coming into your house just doesn't make things easier for anyone. So I think that there has to be something else, because the way that we're doing things now is just especially not working for us. There's cultural differences, how we communicate with one another. They see that we're screaming. They think that there's a violent issue. It's just how we're probably talking to each other. So having an understanding of all these different layers, that if you were just living next door, you maybe have a better understanding. If you were coming to the festivals that we have, or the different community gatherings, maybe you'd have a better understanding. And if there was just a separation from the immediate call the police, we've always been taught to call 911, but maybe there could be something else instead of that.
Well, I want to thank you for spending this time with me just to discuss this important topic going on in Rochester. I do believe that Rochester is a city of promise and hope. I think that you're part of that. Your station is part of that. The community that you represent is a large part of that. And you said it so well that everybody has to work on this together. Having stated that, you have illustrated the power of Black radio. And before we leave, if you could just reiterate why Black radio and Black news organizations are so important to the livelihood of Black Americans, and relating that to all Americans.
Yeah, it paints the whole picture. Mainstream media doesn't always do that. And so with vehicles as ours, we're able to bring a little bit more color.
And on that note, we'll say amen. We can get with that. Andrea Langston, thank you so much, owner of WDKX. I like the way that rings, just rings off the lips there. Appreciate you so much, and continue to do the good work, fight the good fight, and keep stirring up some good trouble up there.
Oh, we will. Don't worry about that.
And don't be a stranger. You're always a friend on this show. Thank you. We're coming back with more after this. And welcome back to the program. So I'm delighted to share with you an event that I was part of last week. I served as the host or the moderator, if you will, for a national conversation bridging the gap between law enforcement and the communities they serve. It's an important topic, and it was a pleasure to be a part of this, an event that was sponsored by Hope for Prisoners and appeared on Facebook Live. And it was all about transforming lives and transforming communities, reimagining reentry, a model for America. And what I'm talking about is making sure that people who leave prison can go on to have a productive life without ever darkening the doorstep of another jail, but just making their life successful. How do you accomplish that? Well, there are many ways to do it, and Hope for Prisoners has been doing it for 10 years. Here's a glimpse of their program.
I hated the police. The police was another element of my enemy.
Hate is an understatement. They pull me over, I'm having nasty attitudes.
The officers will tell you themselves that, yo, I am a correctional officer and you is an inmate. There's lines that we're not finna cross. I'm not your friend, and we had that same understanding about them.
My brother was 3 years older than me, and based off his rap sheet, he always got pulled over for pistols, and he went to jail when he was 18, and he did 5 years. And he was out 2 weeks. I'm in the car with him, and he gets pulled over. The cop just comes to the car aggressively. So he pulls my brother out the car, he searches the car, trashes the car, he doesn't find anything. So they let us go, supposedly. I get in the passenger seat, my brother's on his way to the car. They're going back and forth, arguing. And as I turn around, I will never forget, it was a cop, and shoots my brother 3 times in the back. I grew a lot of hatred and anger towards cops, because I felt like they took my brother away. That put me even deeper in the gangs, deeper in the streets. They never gave him a chance to try to turn his life around.
I think the problems that we're facing today is the lack of respect for people. We have to treat everybody, no matter where they come from in life, the same. They are no different than you, that officer that puts on that uniform every day and gives your life. I don't hear a lot of officers say that they love the people they deal with or they work with. And I think that's part of it too. I mean, we gotta let down all this, we're up here and they're down here, and just keep it equal. You know what I mean? Just because you never been to prison don't mean you can't understand.
So my probation officer told me to go to the workshop. That week changed my life mentally. For the first time ever, I shook Detective BJ. I shook his hand, and when I shook his hand, my whole body was just shaking. Officer BJ, he put his arms around me and put my head into his chest and held me like I was his child. And I had a police officer cry with me. He actually shed tears. It just took all of that anger, hatred, like a dark cloud just went away and the sun shined on. Listening to their story and what they go through, and us as people who rebel against the police don't realize that they have a tough job as well. Even what's going on in the world today, I think we all have to look at it as a whole, and not all cops are the same. But you have those ones who mess it up for everybody. Some are really there to help out, and I just think that my brother ran across that bad one, and if it wasn't for him, I'd probably still be here. But I forgave that officer. I had to let it go.
We need to build relationships, even if we got to start from scratch. The way we community policed back in the day, it wasn't working. We got to come from a different angle. This angle that we thought worked doesn't work. Let's rewrite the books. I became a mentor 2 years ago with Hope for Prisoners. John, he mentors us. That's the difference. John makes us feel like we're welcome. So our lives are transforming too as a police agency. I mean, truly. And I think if other departments saw this, they would learn what community policing is all about. Really caring about the community in a way that comes from here, not just, what's supposed to be community policing. This is community policing at its finest.
To know that there's a team that's for us gives me more hope that when I actually go to another level, there's just a team. There's no way I can fail. If I fail, it's because I don't want to succeed.
When you don't have anybody that really believes that you're gonna change. I have family, and it's like my parents, they do their own thing. They're not worried about what I'm doing. So it's different to have somebody that actually wants to see good come up out of you.
I never saw myself at this stage that I'm at in life. I'm off parole, I'm drug-free, haven't committed no crimes. This is the longest I had a job. When I'm at a traffic light and the police is right next to me, I could wave at them instead of getting ready to punch the gas pedal, you know what I'm saying? I could wave at them, how you doing today, officer? Y'all be safe out here. That makes me feel good that I'm able in a position to be able to communicate with law enforcement like that. Not all these police is my enemy, you know what I'm saying? And I shouldn't look at all of them in that manner. You know what I'm saying? They're dealing with a lot of crazy stuff out here. And when I sit back and observe on what they're dealing with, I do show empathy.
An incredible program. When we return, we'll be talking to the founder of that program, John Ponder, a man who was recently pardoned by the President of the United States. That's next. And welcome back to the program. I'm delighted to share this next segment with you. In fact, we're going to talk about this throughout the show. Last week, I had the pleasure of hosting a wonderful program for Hope for Prisoners. It was a national conversation, a national forum on how we could bridge the gap between law enforcement and the communities they serve. And the title of it was Transforming Lives, Transforming Communities, Reimagining Reentry. Now, that word reentry is about how do you help people who have been in prison for years, incarcerated, how do you help them prepare for the outside world so that when they do get out of prison, they're productive citizens and not repeat offenders? That's what we talked about last week, and it actually expanded into a conversation of just having trust between police and the Black community and the brown community and other communities. Such an important topic. I spoke with John Ponder, who was recently pardoned by the President of the United States. He is the founder of Hope for Prisoners, a successful program for the past 10 years that's helping to change lives in the Las Vegas, Nevada area. Also joining him was Under Sheriff Kevin McMahill of the Las Vegas Metro Police Department. Here now is an excerpt of that national forum of changing lives, and transforming communities. It gives me great pleasure to introduce John Ponder, the founder of Hope for Prisoners. John?
Kelly, thank you so very much. And thank you to all who carved out some time to spend a little time with us here this morning to talk about some solutions that we feel could be the very model for America. I want to thank our other law enforcement partners who are joining the call. I see Lieutenant Munoz from Parole and Probation there. Thank you so much for joining. I know that we also have the director, Charles Daniels of Nevada Department of Corrections, and many other folks, including our friends from the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department. So thank you guys so much for being on this call. We could not do the work that we're doing without our great law enforcement partnerships. So I'll tell you a little bit about Hope for Prisoners and how we have come to the solutions that we think could bring healing to communities across our nation. So our ministry works with men, women, and young adults that are exiting different arenas of our judicial system. And what we do is to provide supportive services to help those men and women not only get acclimated back into workplaces, but to make sure that we have mechanisms in place that once they get inside the workplaces, through partnerships that we built up in the community with employers, that they're going to be afforded every opportunity to thrive and be able to grow, and afforded every opportunity to succeed. We also address the needs for folks who get acclimated back into their family, which quite frankly has been a missed mark of reentry. It's like no one's ever given particular close attention needed to assist men and women that are going to be returning back home to wives and to husbands, and particularly to get reintegrated with their children. So we work as best we possibly can to make sure that there is a mechanism in place to help with that family reunification, because everyone listening today on this call and listening on Facebook Live will understand that if the home life is not right, if the family life is not right, then everything else in the world has a tendency to fall apart. And then on the back end of the process, because there's a long-term 18-month journey where we walk with people wanting to do everything we possibly can to ensure that we're wrapping the proper services around them to make sure that they never, ever, ever reoffend again. So our organization is up and running over a decade now. And over the past decade, we had an opportunity to work with over 3,500 men and women who have been through our process that we've had the great privilege to serve. And of those 3,500 individuals we've had the privilege to serve, we have a recidivism rate that is so ridiculously low, floating somewhere around 6% right now. And our ability to be able to help them to find full-time sustainable wage employment to where they can take care of themselves and take care of their families is something that's caused other jurisdictions across our nation looking for us to replicate our model. So how do we do that? Everything that we do starts out with a very intensive, what we call a pre-vocational leadership workshop. But that doesn't start once an individual gets released. This is why it's so important. And again, I tip my hat to the director of the Nevada Department of Correction, Charles Daniels, that gives us an opportunity to go inside the prison system and work with them up to 18 months prior to them being released. You see, everybody knows that reentry needs to start on day one. And so we want to do everything that we possibly can to make sure that our friends inside that we have the opportunity to connect with, that we are doing everything we possibly can, number one, to address the issues surrounding the circumstances that led to their incarceration. And then, arm them with those things never happening again, so that when they walk out the back door of corrections, they're ready to get back to the business of life.
John Ponder, the founder of Hope for Prisoners, a remarkable story. When we come back, we'll be talking to Sheriff Kevin McMahill of the Las Vegas Metro Police Department. Let's bring in Under Sheriff Kevin McMahill now of the Las Vegas Metro Police Department.
What has occurred over many, many years now is that John and I have gone to so many different employers and appealed to them to give this individual wrapped in this team, this entire group of people, a chance, a meaningful wage to take care of the people that they love. Because the reality is we struggled with stupid stuff. Can't get an ID, can't get a driver's license. We're also going to be honest, right? Unemployment in Las Vegas at one point was hovering around 5%, but even within that unemployment, when you went into just strictly the African-American community, you were routinely over 30%. So it's a completely different story when you're talking about these communities of color and the challenges that they face. And yet we would go through this cycle to watch and to see offender offend, conviction after a trial, go to prison, and then they would come right back out to the same community that they were coming from with no resources, no support. And if I'm going to be candid with you, if I'm trying to fend for my family and the only thing that I could do was go back into the life that I knew before I went to prison, I would do the same exact thing that they were. And so that understanding that we have a different role to play as law enforcement, if we really care as much as I know that the men and women of Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department care, then we had a responsibility to do something drastically different. God's hand has been all over this program since its inception, and I believe it continues. And I know that we are making a difference in the lives of those returning offenders, which has had such a dramatic impact on not only the offenders, but the police officers. The hearts and the minds of so many people are changing day after day because of the work that John and Hope for Prisoners are doing in this community. And I thank God that I'm allowed to be part of it, allowed to help drive it here at the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department. So much of breaking that back down is recognizing the humanity in one another, the good and the love that we all should have for our fellow man and woman. And I think as we move this forward and we grow these types of programs, that this country will eventually change. I know it's changing here in Las Vegas. I'm grateful to all of you for so much mentoring over the years myself, but I know we're making a difference. I know we're going to continue to make a difference, and we're going to make this nation an even greater place to live.
I had the pleasure of meeting this gentleman via an interview. He was at the White House. I was here in my home studio interviewing him because of the technology that we have. And because of COVID-19, I couldn't get to the White House to sit down and talk to him face to face. But he is Pastor Tony Loudon, and he's the pastor of Maranatha Baptist Church in Plains, Georgia. One of his most popular congregational members is the former President of the United States, Jimmy Carter. And Jimmy Carter is no longer teaching Sunday school right now because Pastor Tony Loudon said, you need to stay at home throughout this pandemic. But he's doing a great work, Pastor Tony Loudon, as the reentry director of the reentry program for the White House Initiative. And Pastor, good of you to join us on this national forum.
This topic that John Ponder has brought together to have all of us at this table is so crucial. When he came to me, he said, how should we put this together? And I said, listen, the most important thing that we have to do is that we have to bring people together where we can listen, learn, love, and then lead. As you look all around our country, we are not listening. And this is the time when we got to get to the table where we can listen to one another and talk about the things that we have in common and solutions. But more importantly, after we listen to each other, we have to get to the point where we have to learn from each other. And when we learn from each other of all the conditions that we've been going through, then we can learn to love each other as our Savior has called us to love each other. That I am my brother's keeper, whether he's incarcerated, whether he's in Washington, D.C., Philadelphia, or Plains, Georgia, or in Las Vegas, we can learn to love each other. Now, we can't talk about returning citizens coming back to our communities unless we want to treat them like returning citizens. We have to look at ways of being able to transition them back into the community. And that's why I'm pushing on the state, on the federal level, that every community should have some type of reentry council, that everyone should have a program like Hope for Prisoners, that we should be able to bring children and officers and parents and loved ones, and even those who have been arrested, to the table and say, how can we make our community better? How can we work together? Because we all live here. If we're truly going to take this nation to the next level and make her greater than she's ever been, we have to lead after we listen, learn, and love from each other.
I want to introduce a friend of mine now, someone who's been in the civil rights struggle, someone who's been out on the front lines. He's concerned about the least of these. He really cares about those who fall through the cracks and are often forgotten or determined to be marginalized. And that is Bob Whitson. Now, Bob Whitson is the founder of the Whitson Institute, and he joins us now to weigh in on this important topic.
If you want to go someplace you haven't been, you got to do something you haven't done. And that's what this is all about. I have been blessed to know John Ponder because he is a living parable of redemption. And what John's personal experience has blossomed out, so it has affected thousands of people. And if we want to move in a different kind of direction, we cannot do it by just preaching sermons. People want to see what a sermon looks like in action. They want it modeled in the redemptive experience of individuals. We want to share the good news because people are motivated to change when they see victories that are possible, not constantly reminding them of injuries to be avoided. So in my experience at the Woodson Center these 38 years, we've had some remarkable examples of police interacting with neighborhood leaders to promote the transformation of these communities, because individual redemption has to translate into collective redemption, and that's how a whole community can be uplifted.
Back with my final word after this. And welcome back. I want to thank all the guests who appeared on tonight's program. And as always, I want to thank each and every one of you for taking time out of your schedule to watch. I appreciate you. Hopefully we've been righted, ignited, and united to keep spreading love, freedom, and peace. Good night.
Come on, all aboard. Let me break it down for you like this. The rhythm of love is easy to find if you're listening. The color of light isn't red, black, or white, but it's crimson. We all bleed the same. If you don't feel the groove, it's all right. Just give it time, give it time. Come on, y'all. Get on board. Mankind won't survive if our hearts beat inside a hateful rhythm. You see, love isn't bought, but comes with a price of forgiveness, and we all bleed the same. Yeah. If you don't feel it now, just wait. It's coming on, the love train. Just give it time, give it time. Get on board. That means you and you and you on the love train. Get on board. All creeds and colors, brothers, all sisters and sisters on the love train. Get on board the love train. Everyone's invited. We're all united on the love train. Get on board. All creeds and colors, my sisters and brothers, get on board on the love train. Woo-hoo! Yeah. Yeah. It's all right. Just give it time.